Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Compliance Connection. This is the Healthcare Inspired podcast. We are in season 4, of course, and we are excited for today's topic. I'm going to bring my special guest, my co host, Maya Turner, on the stage. Welcome to the show, Maya.
Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing today? Jennifer, you look beautiful as usual.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much. I am happy to be here. And we didn't get to talk about it last week, but I wanted to remind everyone what a special person Maya is. And I got to share a whole few days with her a couple weeks ago when I went to Chicago and we got to hang out and it was so fun. So Maya, did you have a great time when we were in the Chicago area?
Oh my gosh, Starbucks probably is the gleaning factor there with the pumpkin spice. I don't usually
Yes.
eat pumpkin pie. I don't eat pumpkin pie, but I love pumpkin spice. Everything pumpkin spice. I wish it was year round like eggnog was a
Oh,
year
yeah,
round, but
I'm
it's
one of
not.
those. I'm one of those spices, pumpkin spices that are out there. You know, they have the Swifties where there's like this whole like world of people that are all about the pumpkin spice. So I
Yeah.
think we're one of those. I'll
Yes.
claim it.
I don't get me
Yes.
wrong, I don't like pumpkin pie, but I love pumpkin spice. I love pumpkin creamer, all of that. I don't do like pumpkin like the donuts and all that stuff. Although I haven't, my friend makes a mean pumpkin cream cheese roll, roll. It's a pumpkin cake with cream cheese in it. And it's rolled and it's almost like a hostess cake and you cut it, it is so dreamy. You would love it. I know you.
Oh
It's
well, now
really good.
I gotta go out and get me some pie or some sweets today. Funny story. Last night, my husband and I were like really wanting to get pie. And I had a late meeting. I was doing a presentation for a device company, and then he had to work and clean a building last night. And by the time he got home, we all got together. It was like we looked up, and the pie place is like gonna close before we could even get ourselves together. So we're like, oh. So I decided, okay, we're gonna order DoorDash. We're gonna have the pie come to us because I really wanted the pie. We were gonna get pecan pie, and
Uh-huh.
we're like, let's just get
Uh-huh.
some like
Uh-huh.
late night breakfast food too. So we have the breakfast food and like the pie coming. And they gets there and they're like, oh, by the way,
Oh, that
they're
sounds
out of the
yes.
pie. And so yeah, they were out of the pie. So needless to say, I didn't get my pie last night. I got my skillet meal that was delicious, but I did not get my pie. So we are on the prowl for some pie before
Oh,
the
that's
weekend gets
terrible.
here. I know. It's a sad
But
story,
didn't you say there
but
was like a
well,
pie
yeah.
shop, like a nice pie bakery that was over by you, right?
Yes, absolutely. Now they're not on DoorDash, so they're the kind of place where you have to go. They're like open till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So, I mean, that's the caveat. But yes, it's an amazing place called the Pie
That was
House, and it's one of my
yeah.
favorite places um, to get pie.
Mm.
So
All right,
back
so
to our
pie
topic today.
on
Again, we
the
are in
agenda.
season 4.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And so we are on the horizon with our compliance plan, kind of walkthrough for this season. We are going to start today with element number 1 on our policies and procedures. So we've talked about the importance of creating a really great culture of compliance. We've
Absolutely.
talked about a really great telehealth, understanding that. And now we're going to start digging in the rest of the season to our elements of an effective compliance plan, all leading up to the official compliance seminar in December. So
Mm-hmm,
we
hmm.
have a whole month full of compliance training for you guys. So let's talk first of all about our code of conduct policy.
Mm.
So we talked about it before. It is number 1 on my list of policies. Um, it really just kind of sets the tone for the culture, as we mentioned, because if you don't have staff that respects the code of conduct, then
Yeah.
they may not respect other policies that are necessary to keep the organization moving.
Right.
So, Maya, what are your thoughts on the code of conduct? We'll kind of touch on it real quickly.
Yeah, I think. the code of conduct is that it's all about morals, right? And behavior, and then let's just break it down, right? It's about home training. What kind of home training do you have, and what does that represent when you come into the work environment? So respecting others, understanding people's say, and being cognizant of your actions. What and knowing that you are accountable for the actions that you take. I think that's really just the bottom line. And it's very unfortunate that there has to be a code of conduct policy when you really should have home training. So I guess those are the people that need it for those that don't have home training.
Yes, and speaking of code of conduct and just the general attitude of staff these days, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Office Space, but it's this
Yeah, yeah,
nostalgic, like old school, like I guess it's a movie that we all kind of point to for different things. But
right,
there is a scene where he is in a meeting with his superiors, basically saying that he doesn't care because they're asking him, he's like, I have 8 bosses. And he's like, I have 8 different people that are coming to my desk and all telling me to do things different way. So that's one frustration for people when they are having an attitude problem. Sometimes it's a systemic issue with just the management style, but sometimes they just don't care and they don't feel
right,
like they are making an impact and they don't
right,
feel like they're contributing in any way to success of the organization. And so they come to work, they punch a clock, they do whatever they can possibly do during that day, but they really don't care about anything else.
right,
And that's kind of where it starts, where you start to see an attitude building. And that attitude can be fixed if you get to the bottom of where it's coming from.
right,
I'm not.
right,
I don't think that the code of conduct violations that we see are ultimately just really the employee's fault. Sometimes it's the
right.
environment they're put in. But
Yeah, yeah,
again,
yeah.
at the end of the day, they are responsible for their actions.
Right,
But again, as a leadership, which we'll talk about next week, it is really important for leaders to really assess the culture, like we talked about previously, and how it's contributing to the effectiveness of your code of conduct policy being, of course, followed through on. That's
right,
my take on it because I don't want to
right,
go right to it's always this the staff is the problem. That's not
right,
the issue.
right, right,
Um,
right.
it's just my
I
personal
mean,
opinion.
right, and I agree with that. I think that a lot of times when you're dealing with code of conduct, management is and can be play a factor. But again, I'm a believer that there is a root to a problem, right? And the branches are the attitude that is a result when that root is not grounded and rooted properly. So I think, when you're dealing with codes of conduct, it really is about what the the tone of the company is and how people respond to that tone. If you create a tone or an environment where it's hostile, then guess what? You're going to have hostile employees. That's going to be the root of the problem. The branches are going to be the result of that hostile environment. So you got to create an environment of which people are comfortable and able to work in their greatness, not work
Mm-hmm.
under stress. So if that's
Uh-huh.
a problem, then people are going to have issues. And I think that's kind of gleaning across the factor, when you're dealing with those types of things. At least that's like I said,
100%.
that's my opinion. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
I agree with you, girl. And again, we mentioned previously that Miss Susan Wahlberg, who is a healthcare attorney and compliance consultant, is going to be tackling this topic at our conference in the morning of the conference on December 7th. So we're not going to, dig into her glory and talk about all the things that she's going to talk about. But on a high level, I just wanted to kind of inform you guys some of the common policies that we expect to see in a compliance plan. Again, like I mentioned, code of conduct is the number one I want to see. You really should have a general overview policy for the organization. You definitely want to have billing policies, how you process claims. It should detail, of course, your clearinghouse, your software, all the things that go into that. And so that's in itself a crazy policy. Steps for correcting errors, appeals, things like that. Then you have your coding policies where you're going to have documentation standards put in place. And if there's not a clear guideline in your coding manuals or from regulatory agencies, then you have a policy on how you're going to handle certain ambiguous or gray areas. And another one that we're going to talk about tomorrow in our bonus episode, so stay tuned. We have a vendor spotlight tomorrow. We're going to talk about sales and marketing policies, because sometimes it
Ooh,
is
yeah.
an area where we don't quite get that handled. Quality of care policies, patient incentive policies. If you have not dug into the official compliance guidance that was given to us by the OAG last year, the updated policy, really look into that. They do touch on patient incentives and what you can and cannot do. So it's really
Right.
important to look at
Yeah.
that. And then today, we are actually going to spotlight a certain policy that I wanted to really shed some light on. So we're going to, our next segment, we're going to talk about vendor relationships.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So let's get into the next segment, Maya. When you think vendor relationships, what do you think of?
Well, I mean, it could be anything from providing a service to the office. It could also be relationships with people who have a that need a business associate agreement, like your billing companies. Those are types of vendors, and there has to be clear guidance on the the what is the word, the borders of how all of that stuff works. Then you have to think about people who are servicing as a service, like what do you call that, like vendors that do like the chronic care management and things of that nature. All of those things, all those people are considered vendors. And for definition, vendors are people who provide a service where they are paid, where there is a vested interest to perform a service on behalf of another entity, which in this particular instance, we're talking about healthcare. So if you have a contract for a service that is providing chronic care management, or a contract for a service that is providing billing, or a contract for a service that's doing invoicing, all of those people are considered vendors. And because they are vendors and they're performing a service for a fee on behalf of your organization, then they would be considered vendors, and that they would need to follow under certain guidelines of how that vendor relationship is outlined, and being very clear on what those guidelines are. And even pharmaceutical reps, those are types of vendors as well, because they provide a service. They're providing something that you're paying for that you cannot provide for yourself.
100%. And sometimes I'm going to tell you, this is an experience that a client of mine had, where they had a vendor come in that they respected. And unfortunately, this individual, though, that represented the vendor, did not do a good job of explaining things to the provider, and they went into a relationship not understanding the implications. And the
Yikes.
company was very dissatisfied with that particular individual, and they no longer work there. Needless to say.
Wow.
So
Yeah, yeah.
again, you may have to also audit your vendor performance. It's a really good idea to track the compliance performance of the vendors themselves.
Hmm, hmm.
Regularly audit, making sure that what they're telling you is in line with regulatory guidance. So, for instance, I work with a great device company that I love, and I'm so satisfied working with them as a consultant, because I know that they trust the guidance that us, because there's a couple consultants that work with them, myself and someone else, and they trust the guidance that comes from us, and they know that, like, we're not going to disagree with each other, and if we do, we're going to have we're going to come together and we're going to discuss it from a regulatory standpoint before they go out and
Right,
tell their clinics, this is how you should build this device. They're going to be very clear on it. For instance,
right.
last night I did a seminar for this device company, and there is a competitor out there wanting to use a certain code that is not correct because of the technique that their device uses. The CPT code is very clear,
Oh,
and we know,
yes.
right? We know as coders, in parentheses in CPT, it says IE, which means
Right.
that's the only technique that it applies to. Other times you see the EG, right, in CPT, where you have examples where it could be different techniques that they use to accomplish the same purpose. But this code exists for a specific reason. It's a certain technique, and that is it. So this
Right.
other, of course, product out there is claiming to be able to use this CPT code as well, but it's clear in the book, like there's no way around it. It is an IE
Right. And I think,
situation.
and to glean on that as well, you have to be really careful when you're looking at guidance from suppliers. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times they try to give you the coding guidelines on how to do something, but they're not official coding representatives that's of an authoritative nature. So they'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you how to do something, and then it may not be in line. So that vendor, in turn, could be liable for the guidance that they're giving as far as coding, because you're using a service, they're advising you how to use that service and how to get reimbursed for it. But if they're wrong, then that falls under a compliance issue because they're advising with a vetted interest for you to get reimbursement. So you got to be really careful when it comes to the vendor relationships and the guidance that they give. I've seen on many occasions where vendors, specifically EMR companies, will try to tell you how to code. Well, they're not the coders. And you know what I'm talking about. Well,
Oh, I
they're
do.
not the coders, but they are vendors who have an interest on how to provide a service that you as a provider are looking for guidance. Where they're not the coders. You need to have a certified coder who is understanding of compliance guidelines to provide advice in this regard. But when you look on vendors and that relationship with you, then there is a line that has to be very carefully reviewed if there is reimbursement that is involved for using the product that they're asking you to buy.
Exactly. And the next thing I want to talk about too is really the first step that should happen before we even talk about their performance. But when they come into the organization, you really should be screening these vendors. Just like you have to do a screening of your staff to make sure they're not on
Yeah.
the exclusions list. Any
Uh-oh.
individual who has any dealings with your organization should be
Mhm.
screened
Yeah.
100%.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't know who you got coming through the door, and you don't know what kind of background that they have and what type of, and I hate to say this word, it's pretty strong, what dangers they could cause to your organization for non-compliant. I'm
Right.
just saying.
One of the policies that we use in our compliance plan that we build for clients is the physical security policy.
Yeah.
The physical security of the organization, the people in the building, the actual organization itself, the physical things, right? The building. And one of them is, how you handle the security when vendors come in. And I worked for an organization as a consultant. It's a huge oncology facility, really beautiful facility, actually. And you walk in the door, you go to the front desk, and before you can even get up to the department you need to go to, someone usually comes to get you. You don't just walk up there because you can't even get
Yeah.
into certain areas without a security badge. And so you sign in, you get a badge. They're numbered, and so they know which person has which number. And when they signed in and when they sign out, and that was something that was implemented years ago.
Right.
Whenever we had the HIPAA law and things come out, like that was part of that security, the security rule. And so I saw it and then I didn't see it. I feel like it was over the top for time. I remember back in the day, like it was there in many facilities, and then all of a sudden I didn't see it anymore. It was
Yeah, I
almost
think
like
it kind
people
of fell
forgot
off.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if you had the same
Yeah.
experience. Yeah, I'm just like, it was like weird. I just
Yeah.
thought about it. I'm like, that was a thing. And now I don't see everybody doing it.
No, it's now that I think about it, when you walked in a large building, I mean, and it's not just healthcare, it's in
Mm-hmm.
general. Like
Yeah.
you would walk to the desk and you would sign in, your sign in, time out. Now you just like, "Well, I don't need to sign anything. What,
You just
the
let me walk
security
back
guard is
there.
very laid back. I just walk back there. So yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen that actually a lot more than what I care to admit because I think it's kind of fallen off. I don't know. That's weird. That's very
Yeah, and it
wow.
is very much kind of a hit or miss kind of thing. So I do
Yeah,
encourage you to have that as one of your policies. You should have a physical security policy, and then within that, you can define, vendor security, lock
yeah,
desk policy. You can look at those kinds of things as well. And then the third thing I want to talk about is just the training, right? So sometimes you can really encourage collaborative training with your vendors. So again, you have organizational training with coders and billers and high level compliance teams, and you can actually encourage your vendors to take part in that training as well. Make them take the same HIPAA training that you offer to all of your clients. So I work for another company with a software, not a device necessarily, medical device, but a software. And they have me go through a HIPAA compliance training myself. I just completed it the other day. I'm telling you, it was like, oh, it took forever, but I did it. Because I know I'm a compliance consultant. I'm like, if I didn't do it, I'd be like, that's not good. So I did it. I completed it. And it was, it's some of it is, reminders, and it just refreshes you on the importance of what we do and why we are considered experts in the field, because we are the people that respect those standards. We help to implement them. We also have to do them ourselves. We have to take the training. It's just part of what we do. We're not immune. We're not excluded from having to take the trainings everyone else does, and neither are
Right.
vendors.
Right. I wanted to, add to that, when you're dealing with the pharmaceutical reps and you're dealing with training, and they entice you to buy you lunch. Uh-oh.
Let's talk about this. Yes, let's talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and they entice you to buy you lunch and there's no training involved. It typically, when you are a pharmaceutical rep and you're inviting the office and you're inviting them to buy lunch, there has to be training that's associated with it. You just can't buy the office lunch and then walk out. There
Oh
has
yeah.
to be training that's associated with those free lunches. Oh, they're going to provide lunch today. Okay, well, what are we going to talk about? That should be the next thing when a pharmaceutical provider or any type of vendor decides to buy lunch, because there has to be training that's associated with that. And I think that's why a lot of companies have veered away from it, because
Yeah.
they're not doing the training that's needed in order for that lunch to be provided and be compliant. It should be a lunch and learn, not just a lunch.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I remember back when we had those, and I was working in the orthopedic clinic early in my career, and we'd get them all the time. And even before that, my very first year in healthcare was 2002, and I worked in a rheumatology office. And I have this memory of the Cialis rep coming in, because we shared the office with believe it or not, we had a rheumatology and we shared it with a cardiology clinic. Crazy stuff, weird setup. But anyway, so some of the vendors were for them and some were for us. But then I remember the Cialis rep came in. He was pretty cool. He was a cool guy, but he just stood there the entire time. No education took place. All he was doing was standing there waiting for the doctor, telling him about the drug, and nobody else
No,
was
no,
involved.
no, no,
This is
no.
before this all got kind of crazier. This is years ago.
Yeah,
And so then
yeah,
it
yeah.
kind of evolved, right, from there. And so
Right,
then I was in orthopedic at that point, and then we started seeing that happen more, where it would be like they would come in, they would sign the list. Compliance officer had to get involved for the organization and say, yes, we approve these, so they could sign up to bring a lunch. We could send it to the compliance team. Can you review this? And then they would say yes or no. We can go ahead and schedule it. So they would
right,
get on the list, and that's how it was done in the future. And so,
right,
I mean, I'm not sure how organizations are doing that now, or if they even know what the
right,
compliance standards are.
right. I mean, and a
That we're
lot of
not,
them have. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't say that we're not saying no, but we're saying
Right.
this is how you do it.
That it really is, and I think what's happening is that we've gotten so lax, just like with the HIPAA laws. We got so lax because it's okay because nobody's watching. Well, again, it still needs to take place, rather, and that's about ethics, right? It should take place nobody if somebody is watching or not. There's certain things that you need to be cognizant of, and those reps know. They know what they're supposed to be doing, but they want to do something else and just move on because maybe they don't like teaching. Maybe they don't know enough. They just know how to sell the drug. But at the end of the day, when you're dealing with vendors and you're dealing with drugs and the samples that are given, and you're teaching the providers about the drug and or the samples, and lunch is involved, there has to be training. Because what happens if there's no training? There's liability. And if there's liability, there is suits. So you got to be sure that when you're dealing with specifics like pharmaceutical reps and like lunches, that the training is there so that it could be advised of usage, the side effects, and everything that's associated with the usage of what that vendor has advised you of when you purchase or you provide samples.
100%. So I think that is a great segue into just reminding everyone, when you decide to set up this policy or any other policy, you need to understand the implementation process. The number one thing I want to remind everyone is that these policies do nobody any good if they can't understand them. So
Mm-hmm.
make them, of course, accessible in a, you need to have a document management system, and you also need to make it very clear. So you don't want to, of course, Sean Weiss said this, of course, at the recent conference, that I just want to always remind everyone, it comes from him, but it's something that we should all know, is that you cannot just go on the internet, pull a policy and slap your logo on it, because it doesn't mean anything to your organization. So that is
Yeah, that's
what we want to make
interesting.
sure.
We have a question that says, is there anything similar to a BAA that pharmacy reps need to sign? No, they're vendors. They know what they need to do. They're like when we just talked about the process. What do you say,
Mm-hmm.
Jen?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely similar to that. I think it's a great idea, and I mean, it's part of the compliance that you would put in place to ensure that they are screened properly. So it's definitely something that you want to do, to make sure that they, especially if you're actually inviting them to training and you're requiring them to take compliance training to be a vendor in your organization. Once you sign up, that should be part of your process, if they want to be, part of that. And they may have their own policies already. And a lot of these bigger vendors, like, reputable companies, they already have some of this in place, and they have standard things, those kind of policies already, right? So those things are already there, as far as I'm concerned. And then also, I want to look at, of course, making them clear. Then also, really try to engage your staff in training. Make it something that they can really feel like they're a part of and understand. I don't want people to feel like it's just, they're just doing it by rote, and they keep doing it, and it's in one ear and out the other, like they can't hear, right? I want to make sure that we don't just have our staff just keep doing the training and not really making it impactful for them, not making them feel like they're getting anything out of it, basically. And then finally, make sure that we are continuously monitoring and auditing. And that is one of the elements, of course, of an effective compliance program, which we will get to next month when we get to those elements. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
On our compliance tip of the week, of course, for compliance, is to create a compliance calendar. I love this idea. I think it's a great thing that
Yes.
we always advise our clients. We have one as well, that helps us to walk through the process here and get those things, effective.
Yeah, I mean, and then most of the time, your calendar should be your work plan, right? Your work plan should have a schedule when it comes to compliance, review, because again, audits are supposed to be random. You're not supposed to be you warned that you're going to get an audit. It should be something that your internal team should have in place as part of your work plan and the time basis that's associated with it. And that's pretty much it. And so if you have that in place, your work plan, what you're going to touch on, then obviously it should fall within guidelines of your timeline to have things audited on a regular basis.
Absolutely. We use a great software that I love. So shout out to eTactics and the Spark compliance platform, who I love. And so next week, we're going to talk about element number 2, leadership and oversight, our compliance officers. So stay tuned for that. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this episode of the Healthcare Inspired Podcast, Season 4, the